You are going to die. Not eventually. Not someday. In the abstract, comfortable distance. You, right now, reading this, you are going to die. Everything you are, every memory, every fear, every version of yourself you fought to become is going to stop. Most people manage this knowledge by not looking directly at it. You build things that feel permanent. You love people and let the warmth of that crowd out the cold underneath. You get very good over time at not thinking about it, but it's always there. At 3 a.m., when the room is too quiet, at the edge of a diagnosis, that specific bottomless terror of the nothing, of ceasing, of the universe continuing without you in it. Indifferent, unchanged, not even aware of what it lost. What if you could stop that from happening? What if the nothing never came? You just kept going, past the edge of what a human life is supposed to hold, past language, past memory, past the shape of your own face, past the point where you could tell the difference between existing and being trapped. Junji Ito drew that. He sat down and put it on paper. What it actually looks like when the fear of death gets its answer. When a man gets exactly what every terrified part of him was reaching for in the dark. And it is the most horrifying thing I have ever read. This is the long dream. By the end of it, you will not be sure which you are more afraid of, the death or the alternative. Before we get to the man, we need to understand the woman. Mami Takashima is in the neurosurgery ward of Akatsuki General Hospital. Benign tumor, medically survivable. The doctors have told her this. The numbers confirm it. She doesn't believe it, not because she's irrational, because the fear she carries has nothing to do with the tumor. It's older than that, deeper. The fear that one day, tumor or no tumor, hospital or no hospital, she will simply stop. The thought that is Mami Takashima will go quiet mid-sentence, and the world will keep moving. Indifferent, unchanged, not even aware of what it lost. I'm gonna die soon and be nothing. Not, I'm afraid of pain. Not, I'm afraid of what comes next. Just nothing. The absolute zero of non-existence. She screams in the night. She begs the nurses. She grabs Dr. Kuroda by the coat. Please help me. I don't want to become nothing. Kuroda tells her to have hope, that they're doing everything they can. Doctors say that. It's what they're trained to say. But hold on to Mommy's fear. Because this entire story, every grotesque thing that follows, is the universe's answer to it. And the universe doesn't care whether the answer is kind. Then one night something walks past her door. Footsteps in the corridor. Through the crack of her door, she sees a shape, a silhouette. Something that carries itself like a man but doesn't move like one. Slow. Wrong. Like something that has had so much time it has forgotten what urgency feels like. She is convinced she is looking at the god of death. She screams. The nurses come, Kuroda is called. He tells her it's just a patient. Another patient from another ward. Nothing to be frightened of. He's telling the truth. And he is completely catastrophically wrong. Because that shape in the corridor, that hollow, shuffling, barely human shape, was Tetsuro Mukoda. A man who, 2 months ago, looked completely ordinary. A man who walked into this hospital in clean clothes, with clear eyes and a complaint so strange, the doctor almost laughed when he heard it. His dreams were getting longer. A month ago, they started at 2 or 3 days. Then a week. Then weeks. By the time Mukoda sat down across from Kuroda, the dream from the previous night had lasted a full year. Not felt like a year in the vague, slippery way bad dreams sometimes do. A year, with the weight of one, the memories of one. 365 days of living crammed into the space between closing his eyes and opening them again. Kuroda barely held back laughter, which is the correct response. It's the rational one. A year of time inside a single night is not medically possible. It is not neurologically coherent. It is not something that happens to people. Kuroda was a rational man. That's what makes him dangerous later. But the length wasn't what was destroying him. It was what lived inside them. 9 years of all-nighters for an exam that never came. The particular hell of studying until your mind goes blank, of running the same facts through your skull until they lose all meaning, of waking up inside the dream and doing it again and again for 9 years, 10 years in a jungle alone, not fighting, not dying heroically, just hiding, surviving the grinding monotony of not being found, which is its own specific suffering that only soldiers and Mukoda now understand. 8 years looking for a bathroom. That last one almost sounds funny until you sit with it. 8 years of the body's most basic demand going unmet. 8 years of searching and never finding relief. Just the low-grade, relentless desperation of a need that won't be met and won't go away. These aren't dramatic nightmares. There's no monster in the dark, no chase, no teeth, just the most ordinary human suffering, stretched past any point where a person could be expected to endure it. Made infinite. You can only say it's an illusion because you've never seen my dreams, Doctor. You have no idea how real they are, how lonely, how terrifying. Kuroda had no answer for that. He still doesn't. So Kuroda admitted him. Scientific due diligence. He sat in the dark beside Mukoda's bed and waited. The hospital at night has its own specific silence, the kind that presses against your ears. He sat in it for hours. His eyelids grew heavy. His head began to dip, and then the body in the bed began to move. First the hands, a twitch, then both hands, then the whole frame of him shaking, the way something shakes when it's caught between two forces pulling in opposite directions. Kuroda rushed to the bedside, grabbed his shoulders, screamed his name into the dark, and then it stopped. The body went still. The monitor settled. Kuroda stood in the silence and looked at the readout. The deepest stage of sleep. Achieved in a fraction of a second, already over. Something cold ran up his spine. The kind of cold that isn't temperature. He woke up not knowing where he was. That's the detail that stays with me, not the convulsions, not the machines. The fact that Mukoda opened his eyes in that room and had completely, genuinely lost track of the world. Had to be told, you're in a hospital. You came here yesterday because of the dreams. He looked at Kuroda the way a man looks when he's been gone a long time and the place he left has rearranged itself without him. It was terrifying. A year and a half passed, and in Kuroda's chest, not the triumph of having been right, something quieter. The instinct that this man was not lying, that whatever was happening to him was real in a way the machines couldn't measure and language couldn't hold. He had no idea what he was looking at. He thought he was looking at a medical mystery. He was looking at the end of a man. The nights accumulated, each one longer than the last. Kuroda kept telling him it was an illusion. It's really just an instant, Mukoda. There's nothing to fear. And Mukoda kept nodding and walking out with eyes that had already seen things Kuroda's vocabulary had no room for. He talked about the dreams the way a veteran talks about a war, with the flat specificity of someone who was there and knows in their bones that the person they're talking to was not and cannot be. Not really. The dream last night was 10 years long. Please do something soon, doctor. Otherwise my dreams might reach 100 or 200 years, said quietly, like a man reporting his temperature. Because by that point, it wasn't hyperbole, it was a projection, a reasonable extrapolation of the data. He had done the math on his own destruction, and he was presenting the results with the calm of someone who has already grieved the conclusion. Kuroda sat alone after Mukoda left that day, stared at the closed door. He was beginning to understand that he was not going to fix this. 20 days in, 50 years a night. Think about what that does to a person's sense of self. Your identity and the continuous thread of I that runs from yesterday to today depends on a certain relationship with time. On yesterday being close, recent, reachable. For Mukoda, yesterday was 50 years ago. Every morning he woke up 50 years further from the person he'd been the morning before. Every morning he had to cross half a century of accumulated dream experience just to find his way back to the waking world. Some mornings he couldn't find it at all. His intonation changed. The way he held himself. The texture of how he chose words. The cadence of someone from a different era. Because he was. In some way that the brain scans confirmed, and that medicine had no framework to explain. His mind had lived through that time. It bore the marks. He was still breathing, still physically present in the bed. But the man who walked into Akatsuki General Hospital, that man was already decades away, receding, getting further with every night. And the nights kept coming, and the body caught up. This is where Ito does something genuinely cruel. Because up until this point, you could still tell yourself it was psychological, a delusion, an elaborate dissociation, something that lived entirely in the mind and left the flesh untouched. But flesh doesn't lie. His face changed, his skull, his skin. Kuroda stood in the corridor and said it plainly, as though he is evolving beyond humanity, not degenerating, not decaying from illness, evolving, adapting night by night to a world that only existed in those quaking seconds of REM sleep, a world none of them could enter, a world that was apparently so alien, so fundamentally different from the one they inhabited, that the human body needed to be restructured just to survive inside it. Take a look. That is still Tetsuro Mukoda. The man who sat across the desk from Kuroda and described his dreams with quiet, anxious precision. The man who said, "Please do something soon, doctor." The man who came here because he needed help and trusted that help was possible. He doesn't know who Kuroda is. He doesn't know where he is. His eyes search the room for something familiar and find nothing. And somewhere underneath all of it, somewhere beneath whatever this thing has become, the man is still in there, still frightened, still waiting, in some diminishing corner of his remaining consciousness for someone to help him. Who are you? I'm your primary physician. Try to remember, he can't. But he tries. That is the worst thing in the room. Then one morning he woke up screaming her name. Several thousand years. That's how long in the dream Mukoda had been married to Mami Takeshima, the woman whose room he had passed once, briefly, through the dark. A face glimpsed for a moment through a doorway. In the waking world, a stranger. A woman who didn't know his name. In the dream, his entire life, every version of it, thousands of years of it. And now he was here, and she was not. And the grief on his face was the grief of a man who has lost something genuinely vast. Not months of love, not a year or two, thousands of years of knowing someone, of the specific intimacy that only comes from time so long it stops being measurable. Gone. Because he opened his eyes. This is Ito's quiet devastation. He doesn't ask you to feel sorry for a monster. He makes you understand that the monster is grieving, that inside the horror is a longing so enormous, so disproportionate, so real, that the body becomes almost irrelevant. He loved her. For thousands of years he loved her. And she will never know it happened. He shoved Kuroda aside and ran. Down the corridor, arms out, calling her name in a voice that had long since lost its human shape. The doctors chasing him. His name echoing off the walls of a hospital that had no procedure for this. No protocol, no precedent, no page in the manual that covered what to do when a man who has lived 10,000 years inside his own mind decides he is going to find his wife. He burst through her door, and she looked at what was standing there, reaching for her with hands that no longer looked like hands, and she screamed the one word she had been afraid of since before she ever saw his face. God of death. You've come again. He stopped. Because even now, even inside the psychosis, inside the grief, inside whatever he has become, that word lands. Death. She sees him as death. The thing she fears most. The face of the nothing she has spent every night in this hospital dreading. And he is. In a way she doesn't understand. He is the proof of what happens when you don't die, when the end doesn't come, when existence keeps going past every reasonable boundary and past comfort, past identity, past the shape of a human life, and just continues. He's not death. He's what's left when death doesn't come. They brought him back to his room. And then, briefly, terribly, he surfaced. He sat on the edge of the bed and spoke with the careful quietness of a man who knows he is running out of mornings like this one. He said he understood. The years with Mommy, a dream. Mommy calling him death. He understood why. He was not angry. He was not confused. He was just afraid. What will happen to me when I have an eternal dream? The morning after a dream that never ends. What greets me then? What will I have become? Kuroda sat with that for a long time. A man who has spent his entire life answering questions, sitting with one that had no answer, no clinical framework, no precedent in the literature, no page in the manual. What do you say to a man asking what shape his own dissolution will take? He said nothing. The last night Kuroda felt it before he heard it. The tremors on the monitor reached a level he had never recorded. He sat in the dark and watched the numbers climb and understood, in the place beneath training where the animal still lives, that this was it, the eternal dream. The one Mukoda had been afraid of. The one with no morning on the other side. The sound was almost nothing. A dry crack. Ancient. Final. The sound of something very old conceding to gravity. And then the body in the bed. What had been the body in the bed began to come apart. Not violently. Not with drama or fire or the theatrical horror of something designed to frighten you. Quietly, the way a cliff face gives way, grain by grain, to time. Kuroda stood and watched Tetsuro Mukoda become rubble, become dust, become the particular nothing that Mommy had spent every night in this hospital screaming about, in the gray, indifferent light of an ordinary morning. And even the dust didn't stay. What remained were crystals, found inside the remains of his brain. Kuroda gathered them, studied them for hours under a microscope, and learned nothing the science could tell him, but stared at them with the hunger of a man who has watched something impossible happen and cannot accept that the explanation died with the patient. He had a theory. Two, actually, sitting side by side in his mind like an unanswered question and its darker twin. One, the crystals caused the long dreams, a growth in the brain like a tumor that warped the dreamer's experience of time, the condition producing its own strange artifact. Two, the dreams grew the crystals. The mind spending millennia somewhere biology was never designed to reach, adapting, building something new inside a skull that was never meant to hold it, an organ for the eternal dream. He held them in his palm for a long time, and he thought of Mommy. Here's where the story stops being about Mukoda. Kuroda is not a villain. I need you to understand that. He is not indifferent to what he witnessed. He sat beside that bed every night. He watched a man lose his language, his face, his species, his mind. He heard the question, "Oh, what will I have become?" And he had no answer, and he carried that. And then he looked at the crystals in his palm and he thought, what if that's the gift? Mommy feared becoming nothing more than anything in the world. And here, in the remains of a dead man's brain, was a substance that could replace nothing with something. A dream that never ended. A mind that kept going, kept experiencing, kept being, even after the body had long since turned to dust. He didn't ask her, he didn't explain. He administered the crystals in secret and told himself he was solving the problem she came here with. That he was giving her what she'd been reaching for in the dark every night since she arrived. Yamauchi called it a desecration, called it monstrous. And Kuroda, calm, certain, unshakable, looked at his colleague and said, she feared death. More than anything, she feared becoming nothing. But if she could have an eternal dream, then what would happen? He said it like a question, like he was genuinely curious, like the answer he had watched disintegrate in a hospital bed at sunrise, wasn't already perfectly, completely, devastatingly clear. And that's how it ends. Not with resolution, not with consequence, not with Kuroda arrested or Yamauchi vindicated or anyone learning anything that will prevent this from happening again. Just Mommy Takashima in a hospital bed. Calmer, the nurses say. The tranquilizers must finally be working. Her eyes fixed on something none of them can see. Her dreams getting longer at an accelerating rate. Just like Mukoda. She told Kuroda she feels a little better lately. That her fear of death is lessening. That the dreams have been incredibly long. The thing she was most afraid of, the becoming nothing, is gone. Replaced by something else. And we know with absolute certainty exactly what that something else looks like. We have seen it shuffle through hospital corridors in the dark. We have watched it crumble at sunrise into dust and crystals and a question nobody could answer. We have seen what it costs. We have seen what it takes. We have seen what it leaves behind. Kuroda gave her exactly what she was reaching for. He just didn't ask her whether she wanted it.